I want to move on now to Erin Gallegos, who is the Head of Partnerships and Programme Delivery at the Avast Foundation. Erin, thank you for being with us. And what I want to put to you is one of the themes of Break the Bias of this day is a world that is diverse, equitable and inclusive. What are your thoughts about those ambitions?
Thank you so much, Philippa. I would say I think those are all incredible ambitions, and all of us are here because I think we have some hope that working toward those ambitions is going to make the world a better place. It's a necessary challenge to be working toward a more equitable and inclusive world. Frankly, we all know already that the world itself is diverse, but it's our institutions and our centers of power that don't reflect that diversity. We're also talking about this digital freedom as well as Break the Bias. And digital technologies have been an incredible tool for creating greater access to education, to economic opportunities, to information generally. And that democratization of access is a key building block of a world that is more equitable and inclusive, and one that then inherently values diversity. But at the same time, we see that technology can increase equity and inclusion. It is also, recreating some of the worst parts of the offline world. It's not an equitable world now. It's not an inclusive world in all spaces, either by default sometimes or by design. And examples of that are like the horrific abuse that Mariana has described, which greatly impacts not only women's online experiences, but also their offline safety and their willingness to participate in public life, which means that we lose those voices if we are not providing safe spaces in which they can connect and share their experiences. So I'm so happy to hear from Mariana that just talking about this and the conversation is actually starting to create more of that safety for women who experience these horrific things online. But some of the other ways that we see digital inequity are, in the fact that people who generally lack access to economic resources have their social exclusion compounded by their lack of access to technology through either appropriate devices or access to data or the skills to use those things. And we know that the digital divide exists within every country, between genders and between developed countries and connected countries and those where most of the population still remains offline. And we've also seen, through the pandemic that even where technology doesn't necessarily exacerbate social problems, it can't fix everything. We've lost many of the gains of women entering the workforce over the past decades, just in the last 2 to 3 years, because being able to work from home or work online is not something that every woman can do. And even women who can, that doesn't solve the problems of childcare and of caring responsibilities that many face. So, there's a lot of work to do toward a more inclusive and equitable world. There's so many challenges, but I think technologies are also giving us more and more possibilities for creating alternative ways of working and living and thinking that are inherently more inclusive and equitable, not just for women, but for everyone.
Erin, I want to pick up one of the points you made. It really struck me when you talked about how inequalities in society are amplified online, by the gap in access and the fact that some get more abuse, more pushback than others. Given the leadership roles that you've played, what would you say about what's the best way to create effective partnership with grassroots organisations if you're trying to tackle these sort of issues?
Absolutely. I think in tackling any issue, frankly, not just these issues, but any issue which is affecting a group of people disproportionately, the most important thing that you can do is to create the structures that make it possible to hear from that group of people about the struggles that they're facing, to ensure that they have a place to share those struggles safely and where they will be heard and taken seriously. This is really the way that the foundation endeavors to do its work with communities, is to put their specific experiences front and center and to make sure that they're leading the conversation while we are looking for and providing resources that can help to to remove barriers or to increase access or to help them address problems that they specifically identify in ways that are culturally sensitive and locally relevant to what they're seeing in their life, frankly.
What gives you hope?
You know, what gives me hope is really young people, and I would include Danola in that, as she's one of my colleagues in her capacity as a member of the Youth Leadership Board. But we also have been working with young people in many of our programs within the foundation over the last year, and what I see is just a tremendous amount of energy. I know, especially, anecdotally and in speaking with our partners, that young women and girls around the world really feel like they have the capacity to make change in their communities and across the world. And there are so many young people who are working toward that, who are not necessarily asking for permission, who from institutions which exist around them, but who are deploying technologies in creative ways, making connections with one another, and speaking out about the things that they care about. And that gives me an immense amount of hope.